What happened?
I might be pregnant.
What do you mean, you might be pregnant? Like, the pregnancy test was negative, but you have symptoms?
I haven't taken a test yet. I heard it doesn't show up until you're like, for weeks along. But I'm already having really early symptoms. There's blood in my discharge, and I've been nauseous and running a fever. What do you mean by really early? How's that different from just early? You're a nurse, you should know, right?
I'm not an OBGYN, but I know the basics. Really early is like the 3 to 4 weeks from intercourse to implantation. Pregnancy tests won't pick it up until after that window. And my symptoms match up with being super early.
So you really are pregnant? You're still 14?
It's not confirmed yet. Don't say things that'll make me anxious. Sorry. Sophie is only in 8th grade. And yet, the possibility has come up that she's pregnant. She been acting strange lately, is this why? We talked more after that, but there's no moving forward without confirming if she's pregnant or not. Sophie said the pregnancy test should show a result in about 3 days, so we decided to wait until then. Those 3 days of uncertainty were pure hell. Sophie was devastated at the thought of being pregnant, and my husband was a mental wreck. The house was already in complete chaos. Then the fateful day arrived, 3 days later. I finished my night shift, stuffed a pregnancy test in my bag, and rushed home. Panting, I arrived at our high-rise apartment building to find a crowd had formed. Peering through the gaps between people, I saw several police officers putting up sheets to block the view. Wondering what was going on, I tried to get a sense of the situation and a horrible stench hit my nose. Police, sheets to obstruct the view, a foul odor. The worst-case scenario for my husband and Sophie flashed through my mind. With a sinking feeling, I ran toward our home. A police officer was standing in front of the door.
You're the lady of the house?
We need to talk. Brace yourself for this.
Huh?
Hearing what he had to say, my despair gave way to burning rage. I'll be sure to direct this anger at exactly the right person. I'm a 44-year-old nurse. My husband Richard runs a small IT company. We don't make a huge income, but it's enough to live on a lower floor of a luxury apartment building. Our daughter Sophie is in 8th grade and slowly preparing for her high school entrance exams. She studies hard, so I'm not too worried. But it took a lot for Sophie to be able to focus on her studies like this. The reason for that is her sister Brittany, who's 2 years older. Brittany has disliked me ever since we were kids. I became acutely aware of that around early elementary school.
Dad and Mom totally in you. It must be nice being the younger one. I'm so jealous.
I don't think I'm being spoiled.
Yeah, right. Didn't you just get a bunch of new school supplies the other day?
That's because my pencil case broke and my pens ran out of ink.
Just because you got a good grade on a test, could you stop showing off about studying? I could get better grades than you if I actually studied too, you know.
Then why don't you actually study? I thought that, but saying it would only worsen Brittany's mood and make her criticize me more. Even if I wanted to talk back, I learned the less mature lesson that the easier way to deal with Brittany was to back off to a point. That coping method I picked up back then came in handy not just with Brittany, but in other situations too. It still helps me maintain smooth relationships to this day. It's the one thing I'm grateful to Brittany for. Brittany would pick fights with me over anything. Seems it was because she had an inferiority complex toward me in a lot of ways. Even though she was the older sister, I guess she couldn't stand being inferior to her little sister. But it's not like I'm especially great or anything. She had a lazy streak, she wouldn't even do her homework, and she'd push off things Mom asked her to do onto me. If she could just fix that laziness, I think she could easily surpass an average person like me. But there was one area where Brittany was absolutely determined not to lose to me.
You're in high school now. Shouldn't you learn how to do makeup?
I'm fine without it for now.
Right. No matter how much effort you put into makeup, you'll never match my natural good looks.
She is beautiful, so I agree, but it's irritating to hear that said straight to my face. Feeling inferior to me in other ways, she started lording her looks over me once she got to high school. But without realizing it, I ended up bruising Brittany's pride in the one thing she was confident about.
No way, this kid is your boyfriend?
Yeah.
We just started dating recently. I got my first boyfriend in 8th grade. How come you have one in 7th grade?
It's only a 1-year difference. I ran into Brittany while on a date with my boyfriend. I didn't think it was anything to hide, so I introduced him, but for some reason she glared daggers at me. Brittany's pride seems to be an incredibly delicate thing, easily wounded. Having this mysterious pride of hers injured, Brittany did something outrageous to me.
Brittany, what's this about? My boyfriend suddenly said he's dating you now and broke up with me?
What do you mean, what's this about?
That's exactly what it is. He dumped you and came to me, that's all.
She replied while fiddling with her phone, not even looking at me. To me it was a huge problem, but I guess to Brittany it was no big deal. I was shocked that Brittany stole my boyfriend, but it got worse from there.
Brittany, did you really break up already? It's only been 3 days since you started dating.
Yeah, but my goal wasn't to date him, it was to steal him from you.
Why don't you date him again?
Oh right, it'd be too awkward. Brittany's brazen attitude left me flabbergasted, way past angry. From then on, I made sure to thoroughly hide anything romance-related from her. That sis graduated college, moved out and got a job, then got married the next year. Seeing her looking so blissful with her husband in her wedding dress, I thought surely getting married would mellow out her personality. But rather than mellowing out, her personality took a nosedive from there. A year after she got married, I also graduated college. I moved out when I got a job. And right then, Brittany moved back in with our parents.
That jerk keeps nagging me. Do the laundry properly, clean the house, make me food. If he's got complaints, he should do it himself.
Didn't you quit your job to be a housewife when you got married?
The way I see it, why should I have to do housework just because I'm a housewife?
Then what does housewife means? She said it so matter-of-factly that I almost thought I misunderstood the meaning of the word. She ended up getting divorced after just a year of marriage. Divorce isn't that rare, and I don't mind her moving back home. But I felt uneasy about moving out and leaving Brittany there.
Don't worry about Dad and Mom. I'll take care of them. In exchange, I'm getting all the inheritance.
When I left home, Brittany saw me off at the door, waving and smiling. I'd like to think she was joking, but considering everything up until now, it's scary that it doesn't sound like a joke. Next to Brittany, our parents had strained smiles on their faces. Brittany has been living at home ever since. She doesn't work, stays unemployed. She doesn't contribute a penny and doesn't lift a finger around the house. Basically, she's been mooching off our parents this whole time. But Brittany has her own twisted logic.
I'll take care of them in the future, so they're taking care of me now.
Every time I visited home, that was her pet phrase. How very reliable of her. 6 years after I started working and Brittany got divorced. I married Richard.
Huh, you bagged yourself a hottie. Don't say it like that.
What does Richard do for work?
I run a small IT-related company. You run a company, meaning you're the president?
At a family gathering, Brittany's eyes changed when she heard Richard was the president. It's not like I intended to hide it since it would come out eventually, but I had a feeling nothing good would come from Brittany knowing Richard was the president. So I tried not to mention it, but Brittany finally found out. Sure enough, Brittany made her move. "Hey, I got a minute?" "What's up?" One night, Richard called me over to the living room sofa with an uneasy look. As I sat down on the sofa, Richard showed me his phone's line messages. "What's this about?"
I've been trying to avoid her tactfully so it doesn't hurt our family relationship, but she won't back off. She even ambushed me near my office the other day. Told me to get in her car so she could drive me home.
"So did you get in the car?"
No, that time I said I had somewhere to be and declined.
Looking at Richard's line, there was a flood of messages from Brittany. Most of them were invitations to meals. The incident from high school, when she stole and quickly dumped my boyfriend, came rushing back. Brittany was clearly up to no good with Richard. "I'm so sorry." I apologized to the dejected Richard on behalf of my family member. A few days later, I got screenshots of the line messages from Richard and headed to my parents' place.
"Aren't you too old for this embarrassing nonsense?" "What embarrassing nonsense?"
"I was just trying to get closer to Richard since he's family now." I called a family meeting at my parents' house, but Brittany looked unfazed even when shown the line screenshots. It was bad enough when she stole my boyfriend, but this time she went after my husband. Meaning she had tried to cheat with him. Seeing no remorse on her face and not a word of apology, I got fed up.
"Enough already. Can't you stop messing with me just because you don't like me? Stop with the paranoid delusions. It's not a delusion. You targeted Richard and failed, right? You're 30 now. You're not young enough to draw men in with your looks anymore. Excuse me?"
I slammed the table and got in Brittany's face, then she slammed the table too and snapped back, enraged by my words. Our parents were shaken up by our fighting. In the end, Brittany stuck to her claim that she just wanted to get closer to Richard as family. So Richard and I told her we had no desire to get chummy with her, and made her promise to keep her distance from us as a couple. Hearing us out, our parents looked so sad it made my heart ache, but I couldn't forgive her this time. 2 years after cutting ties with Brittany, our daughter Sophie was born. With Sophie's birth, we needed a bit more space, so we decided to move to a high-rise apartment building. It was a high-rise, but we got a low second-floor unit so the rent was cheaper than the higher floors. But the cheap rent wasn't the only reason we chose the second floor. In the high-rise we moved to, the residential units start from the second floor. So when Sophie gets a bit older, we won't have to worry about her uniquely loud kid footsteps bothering downstairs neighbors. And even on the second floor, we can use the building's rooftop garden, pool, and other facilities. The second floor was just right for us in many ways. After we finished moving, my parents came over for a housewarming. That's when they asked me to make up with Brittany. Ever since the explosive argument with her sister Brittany, I has barely exchanged a single word with her, only catching a glimpse of her face when visiting their parents' home. When little Sophie was born, it seems she was shown photographs by their parents, but she has yet to meet her precious niece in person. Even with the recent move, Brittany was treated like an outcast, left out of the loop, and seen to be drowning in loneliness. I, deciding that Brittany had likely reflected on her past actions, extended an olive branch and invited her over to their new home.
"I'm truly sorry for all the trouble I caused before. I understand. Let's put it behind us. Are you okay with that too, honey?" I asked, turning to her husband.
"Yeah, I've got no issues with it," Richard replied, his tone neutral. When Brittany arrived at I's doorstep and saw the couple's faces, she immediately launched into a deep, heartfelt apology. She seemed far more repentant than I had anticipated, so right then and there, I and Richard decided to bury the hatchet regarding the incident where Brittany had tried to steal Richard away. After cooing over Sophie's adorable face and taking a quick tour of the house, I and Brittany made their way to the rooftop garden, just the two of them.
Wow, it's like a mini park up here. And the view is simply stunning, Brittany exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder.
Brittany grabbed onto the wire mesh fence with her hands, frolicking about like a giddy child as she soaked in the breathtaking view from the rooftop.
Be careful. That's dangerous,
I warned, her voice laced with concern.
Oh, don't worry, this fence is incredibly sturdy.
And it's quite high too.
But you know, since it's wire mesh, you could probably climb over it if you really wanted to. It almost feels like with this, you could just spread your wings and fly away whenever life gets too tough to handle.
Brittany mused, a wistful smile playing on her lips. It seemed that Brittany hadn't changed one bit. She was probably just joking around, but the way she said things that didn't quite sound like jokes while flashing a grin was unsettling. I returned Brittany's beaming smile with a strained, polite one of her own. Later that evening, after Brittany had left, I received a call from their parents.
I'm telling you, those are just wild accusations that Brittany is making up on her own. None of it is true,
I insisted, her voice rising with each word. It turned out that Brittany had gone home and spun all sorts of tall tales to their parents, a mix of truth and fiction. She claimed that the reason I and Richard had chosen a lower floor in the high-rise instead of a higher one was that Richard's company was in financial trouble. Brittany alleged that Richard had racked up a mountain of debt that was still snowballing out of control. She even went so far as to suggest to their parents that I and Richard's once blissful marriage was on the rocks due to the crippling debt. Of course, none of it was true, and I vehemently denied everything. But it seemed that Brittany had anticipated I's denials and preemptively warned their parents that I would try to hide the truth. As a result, their parents bombarded I with questions like, "Tell us the truth. What Brittany is saying is all lies, right?" And remained skeptical of I's explanations for quite some time. It appeared that Brittany was up to her same old tricks, and her initial apology had been nothing more than a superficial act. After reconciling with her for just one day, I promptly banned her from their home. But even after that, she continued her troubling behavior, occasionally spreading bizarre rumors about us and persistently trying to contact them to see Sophie despite being explicitly forbidden from doing so. While these incidents were bothersome, they could have been brushed off and ignored. However, when Sophie was in the 4th grade, her actions took a far more serious turn.
Sophie! Where on earth have you been out so late?
I demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and relief.
We were worried sick about you,
Richard chimed in, his brow furrowed with concern.
Huh? I was just hanging out with Auntie Brittany. She said she'd let you know, Mom.
Sophie explained, confusion etched on her young face.
It's Brittany again,
I muttered under her breath, her jaw clenching with frustration. One day, Sophie failed to come home after school, not returning until around 8 p.m. I and Richard had just been discussing the possibility of contacting the police, as Sophie was nowhere to be found. As the tension drained from their bodies upon Sophie's safe return, I and Richard sank to the floor right where they stood. The moment Sophie mentioned that she had been with Brittany, the pieces clicked into place for I, and she immediately dialed Brittany's number.
What on earth were you thinking? It's common sense to let us know where our daughter is,
I practically shouted into the phone.
I'm sorry, did I worry you? There's no need to get so angry. I just got a little carried away with excitement since you never let me see Sophie. It slipped my mind to give you a heads up.
Brittany replied, her tone infuriatingly nonchalant.
This is kidnapping, plain and simple. If you pull a stunt like this again, I won't hesitate to call the police.
I threatened, her voice shaking with fury. I threatened, her voice shaking with fury.
Kidnapping? That's a bit extreme, don't you think?
We're family, after all.
All right, I won't do it again.
Brittany conceded, but I could hear the smile in her voice even through the phone. It was clear that she was reveling in my anger and flustered reaction. It had been this way ever since they were children. I constantly found herself at the mercy of her whims and manipulations. I feels that her terrible behavior has gotten worse, especially since getting married. This time, even Sophie was dragged into it. Moreover, it seems that Brittany's latest harassment has led to unexpected events.
Why can't I play with Auntie? You always say to get along with everyone, Mom. That's about your friends, it doesn't really apply to your aunt. Auntie was really nice. She bought me ice cream, snacks, and even a keychain.
That wasn't for your sake, it was for my— No, that sounds weird to say.
I don't understand what you're saying. Mom, you're not making sense.
I tried to explain in a way that even a 10-year-old could understand, but she struggled to explain it well. It seems that Sophie had so much fun playing with Brittany that she grew attached to her. However, I couldn't let Brittany and Sophie be together. She tried to explain this, but it made I look like the bad guy who was being mean to Brittany. Eventually, albeit reluctantly, Sophie understood that she shouldn't play with Brittany. 3 years later, Sophie entered 7th grade. While there were no more major incidents like kidnapping, Brittany's small attacks continued. However, their relatives had already determined that all the stories Brittany spread about I were misinformation, so I and Richard no longer needed to clear up misunderstandings. But as the hassle of dealing with Brittany slowly decreased, another problem emerged.
I heard you're not going to club activities. Yet you come home late. Where are you going and what are you doing if not to club? What does it matter where I am? Just leave me alone. How can I leave you alone? Aren't you worried that something might happen? Stop nagging. Nothing's wrong. I'm fine.
Sophie had clearly entered adolescence.
You're loud and you stink.
Before leaving the living room, she yelled at the worker cleaning the exterior walls and stomped off to her room. When I apologized to the worker outside the window, he slightly lifted his helmet and greeted her with a smile. Looking up, I felt embarrassed and immediately fled back into the house. I feels that Sophie's change in attitude started around the time she got a boyfriend. As soon as she entered middle school, Sophie got a boyfriend, breaking me and Brittany's record for their first boyfriend. I wondered what middle schoolers do when dating, but it seemed they walked home together and went out cycling on weekends. She found their innocent dating style endearing. However, shortly after getting a boyfriend, Sophie started skipping club activities to hang out, staying out from noon until night on weekends, and coming home after eating dinner out. I scolded her many times, but the more she scolded, the more it backfired, which is common for children going through puberty. I and Richard were at their wits' end with Sophie. It seems she's not studying at all. And she's quite sloppy with how she spends her allowance. But scolding her has the opposite effect. Instead of scolding her each time, maybe we should wait a while, watch the situation, and scold her when the timing is right. Is it really okay to take such a leisurely approach? Adolescence only lasts a short while, right? And at her core, Sophie is a serious kid. She'll go back to being an honest girl soon. I hope you're right. Richard has a gentle personality and I has never seen him get angry at her. I wanted him to scold her strictly like a father should, but it seemed she couldn't expect that from him. As Richard suggested, from then on I tried to scold Sophie little by little while observing her behavior. However, this may have been a mistake. Perhaps thinking she wouldn't be harshly scolded no matter what she did, Sophie's attitude didn't change even after a year. Sophie, you're already in 8th grade. Isn't it about time you start thinking about entrance exams? You understand that, right? I know that without you telling me. I'm going to school properly, so you can't complain, right? Just going isn't good enough. What do you plan to do if you fail the entrance exams? Well, I could just catch a man and have him support me. Dad's a company president, so I could aim even higher. Maybe an oil tycoon? I sighed at how she had become a completely different person, like someone I know. She was clearly looking down on the world. How did it end up like this? I started to feel that adolescence wasn't the only reason for Sophie's change. About a month later, Sophie showed another change.
Dinner's ready.
I don't want any.
Are you okay? You didn't eat yesterday either, right? And weren't you throwing up in the bathroom last night?
It's nothing, I'm fine.
Really? Are you really okay? Should we go to the hospital tomorrow? Want me to make some soup? I said I'm fine.
Sophie knocked the dinner laid out on the table off with her arm. With a loud crash, the floor was instantly covered in food and broken dishware. Sophie glared at I, her hands on the table. I looked back at Sophie's face with a sad expression, meeting her glare. I and Sophie's eyes remained locked for a few seconds in silence. The sound of a newspaper being folded could be heard from the next room, and Richard came over with a relaxed gait. I thought Richard would calmly scold Sophie while observing her behavior as usual, but he suddenly yelled at Sophie.
Enough already! Don't you understand how worried your mom is?
I flinched at Richard's loud voice, which she rarely heard. Sophie also seemed to cower in place, perhaps frightened by being yelled at by Richard for the first time. It seemed Richard had been listening to their exchange from the next room.
If there's something troubling you, try talking to us about it. Your mom and I are on your side no matter what.
I just don't know what to do anymore. Richard's tone changed completely from when he yelled, speaking to Sophie with his usual gentle voice. Something seemed to snap inside Sophie, and she started to cry. I and the others moved from the dining room to the living room and had Sophie sit on the sofa to hear her out. What happened?
I might be pregnant.
I and Richard silently looked at each other. The unexpected words that came out of Sophie's mouth clearly had Richard shaken up too. However, now was not the time to get flustered. First, I want to confirm, have you done that kind of thing before, Sophie? Sophie nodded silently. With your boyfriend? Sophie nodded silently again. I had a few more questions about the act itself, but any more might be too much for Richard to handle mentally. I hadn't checked Richard's expression, but she could imagine it was probably quite a sight. What do you mean you might be pregnant? Like, you took a pregnancy test and it was negative, but you have pregnancy symptoms?
I haven't tried a pregnancy test yet. Those don't show a reaction until around 4 weeks into the pregnancy, right? But I already have very early symptoms. There's blood mixed in with my discharge. I have nausea. My body temperature is high.
What do you mean by very early? How is that different from just early? You're a nurse, so you should know, right? I'm not in obstetrics and gynecology, but I kind of get it. Very early means from the time of the act until implantation occurs, which is about 3 to 4 weeks. Like Sophie said, pregnancy tests won't show a reaction until this very early stage is over. Her symptoms match those of the very early stage too. So Sophie really is pregnant? You still 14. It's not confirmed yet.
Don't say things that will make Sophie anxious.
Sorry. Sophie, who had just calmed down, was on the verge of tears again. She seemed to be clenching her back teeth to keep the tears from flowing. You sure know a lot about pregnancy tests and the very early stage.
I looked it up online.
Why did you do that kind of thing with your boyfriend?
One of my friends had already done it. When I asked about it, everyone said they wanted to experience it soon too, and it turned into a competition of sorts to see who would do it next.
Sophie didn't meet Ai's eyes as she answered. She likely felt remorse and regret for what she had done, but I thought Sophie couldn't meet her gaze because she was lying. There was no definitive proof. It was just a mother's intuition. However, even if Sophie was lying, they had to resolve the major problem of her possibly being pregnant first. It wouldn't be good to expand the issue right now. I decided not to pursue the matter with her. They talked about various other things after that, but there was no way to progress the conversation without confirming whether Sophie was pregnant or not. According to Sophie, it would take about 3 more days before a pregnancy test would show a reaction, so they decided to wait until then. Those 3 days of uncertainty were hell itself. The next day, Sophie became too anxious to go to school. They told the school she had a cold. Today was Friday, tomorrow was Saturday, and there was no school, and the day after that would be the fateful 3rd day. I prayed that the pregnancy test would be negative on Sunday and things would go back to normal on Monday. As for Richard, he went to work. However, even though there were still 3 days left, he seemed restless from the morning as if Sophie was about to take the test at any moment, so he probably couldn't focus on his job. When Richard got home from work, he looked haggard. The mental strain seemed to be even worse than I had imagined. Sophie might be pregnant, and Richard's psyche was crumbling. The situation at home was already dire. On the fateful Sunday, I, who was coming off a night shift, hurried home with a pregnancy test in her bag. Arriving out of breath in front of the high-rise apartment building, she saw that a crowd had gathered for some reason. Peeking through the gaps between people, she saw several police officers putting up sheets to block the view. Wondering what had happened, I observed the situation and caught a whiff of a nose-wrinkling stench. A crowd, police, sheets to obstruct the view, a foul odor. The image of Richard and Sophie climbing over the fence of the rooftop garden flashed through my mind. She had a bad feeling about this. I ran towards her home. She couldn't wait for the elevator, so she dashed up the stairs. It was Sunday, so both Richard and Sophie should be home. I forcibly tried to replace the recurring mental image of the rooftop garden with one of Richard and Sophie relaxing at home. However, as she climbed the stairs, the rooftop garden scene returned to Ai's mind. A police officer was standing in front of her door. Despite having run the whole way, I approached her own home with slow, measured steps. Her pace gradually slowed until despair stopped Ai's feet in their tracks before she could reach the door. The officer, noticing Ai, walked over to her.
Are you a resident of this home? I have something to tell you. Brace yourself for what you're about to hear.
What? Upon hearing what the officer had to say, Ai's despair vanished and was replaced by fury. She would be sure to direct this anger at the person who rightly deserved it. I first entered her home to drop off her things, then headed back out to the front of the high-rise. The crowd still hadn't dispersed. I looked around and spotted a certain individual in the crowd, grabbing them by the arm. Whoa! You scared me. Oh, it's you. Don't frighten me like that.
Hey, come to my place for a sec.
What?
Really? I thought I was banned from your house. Never mind that. Just hurry up and come with me. Wait a sec. Don't pull on me like that.
I yanked Brittany's arm and forcibly dragged her back to the apartment, sat her down on the sofa, and then collapsed onto the floor herself.
What's going on? Did something happen? Does it have to do with the police out front? Yes, it does. Not only that, but you're involved, Brittany. I'm involved? What do you mean?
Brace yourself and listen. About what's happening out front. Richard and Sophie jumped from the rooftop garden. The two of them climbed over the fence together.
What?
No way, you're trying to trick me, aren't you?
I'm not falling for that.
Brittany, this is the truth. There were police gathered, sheets blocking the view, and a foul smell, right?
You mean it's really true?
I understand that it's hard to believe. I felt the same way when I got back from my night shift and heard it from the police. But unfortunately, it's true. You see, Sophie said she might be pregnant. After that, things at home were a mess, with Sophie shutting herself in and Richard having a mental breakdown. They must have reached their limit. Yesterday evening after I left for work, sometime during the night. No one noticed all night, so the two of them were left outside like that until morning. Then they were discovered when morning came. As she listened to I's story, her face grew paler and paler. It wasn't just the shock of hearing that her relatives had done such a thing. The root cause of Richard and Sophie ending up like this lay with Brittany.
Brittany, why were you near our apartment building? Oh, I have a friend who lives nearby. I was planning to go to her place today, but I saw the crowd gathering and went to check it out. Brittany, I just explained what happened to them. Now's not the time for lies. What?
I took out a smartphone, opened a social media app, and placed it on the table. It was Sophie's phone. The screen showed her correspondence with Brittany.
It looks like you'd been secretly meeting with Sophie and giving her allowance money since she started middle school. You usually met on Sundays. So you came here today to see Sophie too, right?
I apologize for meeting her in secret. But is it really so wrong for me to see Sophie?
That's not the point, is it? Tell me why you were giving Sophie money.
Brittany's gaze shifted to Sophie's smartphone and she fell silent for a moment. But after a few seconds, she turned to I with a pained expression. Looking I in the eye, she finally began to tell the truth. No good comes from kids having money, right? The same goes for adults. So I was giving Sophie an allowance of about $100 a month. I figured that would make her become depraved and less diligent, which would trouble you. I also took the chance to badmouth you while I was at it.
So Sophie's change in attitude since starting middle school was because of the money you were giving her. Did you know about the pregnancy?
I did. I encouraged her, telling her she could gain the upper hand on her friends by losing her virginity. I told her lots of things, like how there are other middle school girls who have sex for the first time, and how you had your first time with a teacher back in middle school. Why did you have to make it about me? I didn't do anything like that in middle school. You took every chance you could to speak ill of me. And Sophie, swayed by your words, went and had her first sexual experience. That's right. Afterwards, I met up with Sophie, touched her body, and lied that her temperature was high and she might be in the very early stages of pregnancy. I kept feeding her more information and fueled her anxiety, telling her she might be pregnant. Then it was like she had a phantom pregnancy and actually started showing very early symptoms. Even though I had taught her to use protection when she had sex for the first time, so she shouldn't actually be pregnant. Kids sure are naive and cute, aren't they?
But if she took a test, she'd find out right away that she's not pregnant, right?
It takes about 3 to 4 weeks before a pregnancy test will show a reaction, doesn't it? If Sophie gets anxious and stirs things up at home during that time, it'll trouble you again, won't it? You dragged Sophie into this mess just to harass me? I can't believe it. Do you have any idea how much she suffered? I never thought she'd be driven to this point. But thinking about it, I guess the possibility wasn't zero. A middle schooler getting pregnant from her first time. Not only for her, but the father wouldn't be able to handle it either. If either one of them said they wanted to end it, it wouldn't be strange for them to do it together. Brittany slumped in dejection. She had essentially taken people's lives, so she was likely being crushed by regret and guilt. At this rate, Brittany might do something drastic out of a sense of responsibility. It was about time to bring this to an end. It was pretty much how I imagined.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Auntie, you're the worst. I can't believe you used me like that. Mom, I'm so sorry for everything. Sophie, you've been apologizing this whole time. You get that you're the biggest victim here, right?
What? What do you mean? They're alive? Then what about the police out front? The stench?
On cue with I's words, Richard and Sophie emerged from the next room where they had been hiding. Brittany seemed confused by the fact that the two were alive, the police out front, and the elaborate ruse they had staged. Her gaze wandered aimlessly as she looked around. I decided to explain the situation so Brittany could understand. The police out front came because of a dispute with the neighbors.
Huh?
I heard about the situation out front from the officer standing in front of our door. It also made me realize the connection between Sophie and you. Brace yourself for what you're about to hear. The target of this incident was you.
What? What are you talking about?
Recently, the management company contacted me about someone who was harassing the apartment building by throwing raw garbage at it. They installed security cameras, identified the culprit, and learned that the acts were often committed early on Sunday mornings, so they were staking the place out. Raw garbage being thrown at the apartment building? And it seems the garbage was specifically aimed at your unit's balcony.
What? At our place?
Due to the wall and limited space on the property, it was difficult to actually get the garbage onto the balcony, so most of it ended up stuck to the building's exterior wall. The person from the management company was lamenting how they'd have to hire a contractor to clean the walls, which would cost money. Oh, so that's why there was a worker here at an unusual time. I recalled the time Sophie yelled at the worker and felt embarrassed all over again. The police provided more details after that. The culprit was a man in his 50s who lived in the neighborhood. Also, the sheets used to block the view weren't put up by the police, but by the management company out of consideration for the fact that scattered raw garbage would leave a bad impression and be visually unpleasant. It was done out of kindness, but the act of concealing the scene had the opposite effect of making people think it was a serious incident, drawing a crowd.
But I don't remember doing anything to make someone hold a grudge against me.
There's something I'd like to confirm about that. The police officer took a photo of I with his smartphone and showed it to the male culprit for confirmation. As a result, it came to light that the man had mistaken his target. According to him, he had apparently been tricked by his intended target. Hearing this, something clicked for I. That man got into an argument with a certain woman about a car. Something about not parking on this street. At that time, the woman told him if he had a problem with it, she lives in that apartment on the second floor in that unit, so he could come by any time. She even gave him my name.
Well. So that man mistook you for her and made you the target of his harassment. That's quite unfortunate.
Don't give me that transparent lie. That was you who came to give Sophie her allowance and got into trouble with the neighbors, right? Then you pushed it onto me as part of your usual harassment of me, didn't you?
Where's your proof of that?
When they showed the man your photo, apparently he shouted yes. It's her. She seemed to be in quite a panic. She was so flustered that it completely slipped her mind that the man had seen her face.
If you were coming to our place, it's only natural to suspect you were up to something with Sophie, right?
Sophie was getting money from you, so it seems she had a hard time bringing herself to talk about your secret relationship. But when I pressed her on whether you were involved, she mustered up the courage to tell me. And when I heard you were coming today, I decided to hear the story from your mouth too, so we came up with this plan. Seriously, aren't you ashamed to be luring in a child with money? Sophie! You're betraying me? Don't you think it's shameful to deceive a child? As for Sophie, we'll give her a proper scolding. More importantly, how are you going to take responsibility for involving her in your harassment of me? Sophie wasn't actually pregnant, but she did something unbelievable, you know?
What's the big deal? She was going to do it eventually anyway, and it's not like she loses anything.
I was appalled by her attitude, something she hadn't felt in a long time. No matter how much they got angry at her, it probably wouldn't have any effect. In that case, she just had to rely on someone who might. Brittany, shall we go then?
Go? Go where?
To the police.
The police? Why?
They asked me to bring you over later because they want to talk to you about the neighbor dispute. I think they're still waiting downstairs, so let's go together.
I'm absolutely not going.
Is that so? Then I'll bring the police up here. I'll tell them you're being selfish like a child and refusing to come down. Brittany gave up and started walking lifelessly towards the front door. I followed behind her to make sure she didn't run away. Brittany was too afraid of the police. I didn't think she had done anything to warrant being arrested. Still, her sensitivity to the police was likely because she was aware that harassing I for years was wrong. Brittany was outside profusely apologizing to the police as she spoke with them. After seeing that, I returned to the apartment. Can I try this pregnancy test? Sure, you're probably not pregnant, but let's check to put your mind at ease. When they got back to the room, Sophie had regained her former honest and cheerful personality. Although Brittany wasn't arrested since she was the root cause of the neighbor dispute, she got a thorough scolding from the police. I also gave a detailed report to their parents about the incident. Their parents had hoped that the relationship between the sisters could somehow be improved, but they were furious that Brittany had involved Sophie. It seems she was kicked out of their parents' home. Now she's apparently renting a small, cheap apartment and living alone. However, Brittany had been unemployed and living with her parents' help. So at 46, she had no skills, experience, or savings whatsoever. Being cast out in that state, there's no way she wouldn't struggle to get by. Since it would be tough to live while staying unemployed, Brittany apparently tried to find a job, but in this day and age, the conditions are too harsh for a 46-year-old with no skills or experience. In the end, Brittany increased her part-time work to boost her income, but with part-time jobs, she apparently has to work from morning to night just to barely scrape by. I think Brittany should work hard to make up for all the easy living she's had until now. She may be fine now while she's still got energy, but what does she plan to do as she gets older? Well, neither I nor their parents have any intention of helping Brittany no matter what happens to her, so she'll have to figure it out herself. With this, Brittany no longer had the leeway to mess with I, and peace returned to I's life. Even though Sophie had been used by Brittany, she reflected on her disorderly lifestyle and cold attitude towards her parents. I and Richard returned the money Sophie had received from Brittany, but Sophie says she'll work part-time in high school to pay it back. It's about $1,000, which isn't an amount that can't be repaid with a high school part-time job. I doesn't mind if Sophie doesn't pay it back, but she did promise to have Sophie return the money as a way of drawing a line under the matter. Sophie is now working diligently on her studies to prepare for her high school entrance exams. To focus on studying, it seems she even broke up with her boyfriend. Both I and Richard are reflecting on this incident. They should have protected her better. We are both more determined than ever to fulfill their roles as parents. I have better chemistry with her. That's why I'm divorcing you.
Sorry, Hallie. Oh, and feel free to sue for alimony in the divorce. This guy will pay for everything for you.
Kent, who thrusts the divorce papers at me, says with a flippant laugh. Standing next to him is his mistress, Regina, with a triumphant grin on her face. I thought he'd been coming home suspiciously late recently, but I never imagined he was having an affair. And these two had the audacity to confess their adultery right in front of our daughter. They clearly don't give a damn about how a child would feel seeing her own father's infidelity and his intimate behavior with his mistress. I couldn't care less about divorcing him. But if they dare to hurt my precious daughter, I won't show any mercy. I take a small breath and vow in my heart to give these two a taste of hell. My name is Hallie Ingram, a typical 40-year-old working mother. Kent and I had an office romance, and this year marks our 12th wedding anniversary. I'm just a regular employee in the accounting department, but Kent is a manager in the company's core planning division, with a respectable position and income. Our daughter Hilda, who just turned 9, is a very smart, thoughtful, and wonderful child, unlike me. She's very attached to me and incredibly cute. Recently, she's even started helping out with household chores. But on the flip side, she doesn't seem to like her dad very much. Because he is uncooperative with housework and childcare, and criticizes every single thing I do. Hilda, who grew up with a father like him, has hardly spoken to him lately. But I had a reason why I could never bring myself to take Kent's side. It goes back to when Hilda was 5 years old. Hilda had wet the bed one time. I'm sorry. Hilda, who had recently outgrown bedwetting and become a big girl. She was blushing and on the verge of tears from the sheer embarrassment.
It's okay, don't worry about it.
I try to cheer up the dejected Hilda. But instead of washing the sheets or comforting Hilda, Kent scowled and spat out.
Ew, that's disgusting. What the hell are you doing?
Hilda's face held a look of despair at her father's treatment. Of course, I immediately scolded him and made him apologize to Hilda. But she still remembers that incident and it seems she can't forgive him even now. His apology was just for show, and he kept grumbling complaints under his breath afterward, so I don't think he understands just how awful he was to his daughter. Hilda noticed that too, and since then, she's hardly tried to interact with him. In the first place, Kent only doted on Hilda when it was convenient for him. When he was in a foul mood, he would even take it out on Hilda when she came running up to him with a smile. It's entirely his own fault, but he's convinced it's because I turned Hilda against him.
It's your fault Hilda hates me. Do you enjoy excluding me that much?
He would frequently shout at me like this when he was in a bad temper. We've only been married 12 years, but I'm not confident I can stay with this man going forward. Every time the word divorce crossed my mind, I would secretly sigh. One day in early February, when the cold reached its peak.
All right, let's work hard on making these. Mommy will help out.
Hilda had been in the kitchen since morning to make Valentine's Day chocolates. Apparently, kids these days don't give chocolates to boys they like, but exchange them with their close friends. It's so different from the Valentine's Day I know. As I was thinking that, Hilda took out a distinctly wrapped package, looking a bit embarrassed. It's for a boy in my class. Seeing Hilda blush and act all shy, I couldn't help but smile.
I see. Then let's make the chocolates in this wrapping a little extra special. Yeah.
I wanted to hear more details, but I knew Hilda would get upset if I pried too much. So I suppressed my burning curiosity and devoted myself to helping her out. After that, the chocolate making was a success. Since she would give them out tomorrow, we put them all together in the fridge. But the next morning,
the chocolates are gone. Why?
Hilda, who had opened the fridge with a cheery look, let out a cry of despair.
Why?
There were only a few chocolates left in the fridge. Then Kent, who had woken up sluggishly, came over and spoke to me in a mocking tone.
Oh, I ate the chocolates in the fridge yesterday. Handmade chocolates for Valentine's Day?
How old are you?
I wanted some high-end stuff they sell at department stores. And man, you suck not just at cooking but at making sweets too.
Apparently, he had mistakenly thought I made them and ate up the chocolates in the fridge. He kept saying they tasted bad, so I wondered how he could eat almost all of them, but that's beside the point right now. Those chocolates were made by Hilda. She was going to take them to school today and hand them out to everyone.
What?
Kent suddenly got flustered and started making excuses that it wasn't his fault.
It's your fault for leaving them in a place like that. It's like saying it's okay to eat them. It's not my fault.
Hearing that, Hilda yelled at him as big tears streamed down her face.
Of course it's wrong to eat them without permission. Enough, I hate you.
Later, he tried to appease her by offering to buy her whatever she wanted. But she ignored him, wrapped up the remaining chocolates, and took them to school.
This is your fault. Why is it my fault? Hilda cried that much because you didn't follow up properly.
I held my head in my hands at his incredibly misplaced lashing out. Hilda was feeling down for a while about the Valentine's incident, but when my parents came to visit on the weekend, her mood instantly recovered.
Grandpa, Grandma, let's play together.
Seeing Hilda in high spirits, my parents were also beaming with smiles. Especially Grandpa, he was grinning so much it looked like his face might melt off. She really is such a good kid. My parents dote on her a lot, so she's very attached to them. By the way, Kent's parents live far away and are quite difficult people, so Hilda seems to find it hard to get close to them. Around 10 a.m., when the living room clock struck the hour, Kent came shuffling into the living room in his pajamas.
Shut up. It's the weekend, so let me sleep in.
Oh, my bad.
Harlot?
Kent, who had entered with his usual manner, made a surprised face upon seeing my parents in the living room. Grandpa is strict about manners and etiquette, so he feels uncomfortable around him.
Are you busy with work? I'm sorry for barging in at a time like this.
When Grandpa said that apologetically, he shook his head vigorously from side to side. Then, he called me outside the living room.
If your parents were coming, you should have told me beforehand. It's embarrassing to be seen in such a slovenly state. But I worked overtime until late last night and I'm sleepy.
He scolded me in a voice low enough that my parents couldn't hear. By the way, I had properly informed him in advance that my parents were coming. It's his own fault for forgetting that and lazing around in bed until this hour. I sympathize with him working overtime late, but come to think of it, he's been coming home late a lot recently. It's a different department, but I hadn't heard anything about the planning division being busy. I wondered if some trouble had occurred with work, but he was angry so I couldn't ask him anything more. Even after changing and tidying up his appearance, he remained in a foul mood.
It's about lunchtime. Shall we go out to eat? Yay!
After having a pleasant time with everyone except the sole grumpy Kent, Grandpa suggested going out for lunch. Oh. I have to go out now actually.
Huh, you do?
Yes, I do. When I asked back in surprise since I hadn't heard about him going out, Kent replied, unable to hide his irritation. After that, we enjoyed a fun lunchtime without him.
See you later then, Hilda. Yeah, see you.
After seeing off my parents, who were heading straight home, at the bus stop, Hilda and I made our way back. Upon returning home, Kent was standing there with an annoyed look on his face, even though he was supposed to have gone out.
Huh? I thought you went out?
Then, he exploded with rage and shouted at me.
Do you still prioritize your own parents even after getting married? Normally you're supposed to put your husband first, aren't you? Huh, what's this all of a sudden? Do you have no awareness as a wife?
Ignoring my words, Kent kept yelling. Judging from the way he spoke, apparently he was upset about being left out. Then you should have just come to lunch with us.
I don't want to eat while having to worry about your parents on my precious day off.
I suppressed the urge to feel dismayed, thinking what the heck is that? By the way, right after Hilda was born, during a challenging Christmas season, I was half-forced to visit Kent's family home. It was a hectic time preparing for Christmas, so while taking care of Hilda, I also helped out at my in-laws and had to spend the time until New Year's carefully avoiding offending my moody in-laws. Compared to that, this is nothing, but for Kent it seems to be something rage-inducing. Sigh. Seeing him ranting angrily, Hilda let out a small sigh. She had been smiling merrily until a little while ago, but her gaze toward Kent had completely cooled. Then one day. That day, Kent unusually went out early in the morning, so Hilda and I were relaxing at home.
What should we have for lunch?
Since it was just me and Hilda, I opened the fridge thinking we could do something simple. Then I heard the front door open and a voice saying I'm home.
Huh? He said he wouldn't be back until evening though.
I tilted my head and went to the entryway, but it wasn't just Kent standing there. Hi there, you're Hallie from accounting, right? I'm Regina Nolan, the receptionist.
Huh?
Standing next to Kent with an unbelievable smile on her face was Regina, who had just joined our company recently. I heard she's incredibly cute and has several male employees going after her. Why was she at our house on the weekend?
Let's not stand around talking. Why don't we go to the living room?
Surprised, but guiding Regina to the living room. Hilda also seemed startled by the sudden visitor. And as soon as the two sat down on the sofa, they dropped a bombshell. So, I'm remarrying this person.
What?
The two looked at me with disdainful eyes as I let out an absent-minded voice. Then they continued with smirks on their faces.
I have better chemistry with her.
That's why I'm divorcing you.
Sorry, Hallie. Oh, and feel free to sue for alimony in the divorce. My guy will pay for everything for you.
Saying my guy, Regina intertwined her arm with him. Seeing the couple getting intimate, the cool-headed part of my brain understood. Ah, an affair.
I was planning to tell you another day, but she insisted on getting married by Christmas, so I thought I'd let you know early.
I brought this too. Kent thrust divorce papers that had already been filled out at me as I remained in a daze.
I've been dissatisfied with our married life for a while now. I mean, I'm the ace of the super important planning department, you know? It's a mismatch for a guy like me to be married to a boring accounting hag like you. A young, cute girl like her suits me better.
Regina looked at me with a triumphant smile at Kent's words. I had been in a daze, but I snapped out of it at Kent's next words.
Oh, I'll give you custody. Hilda doesn't get attached to me, and she's not cute at all lately, just like you. Wah!
Kent said something outrageous in a voice loud enough for Hilda in the living room to hear. I hurriedly looked at Hilda, and while she didn't seem to understand the situation, she appeared to have understood his words. Hilda was looking at us with a devastated expression. The moment I saw her face, rage surged up inside me all at once. I swiftly picked up the divorce papers, quickly filled them out and showed him.
This should do, right? I'll go submit it to the municipal office now.
And I took Hilda by the hand to her room, swiftly packing necessary clothes and such for an overnight stay. Then I quickly packed my own things too. I couldn't leave Hilda in this house with such awful people any longer. For now, I got my muddled head together enough to pack the bare essentials and go to my parents' house. As we hurriedly left, the two saw us off with nasty smirks until the very end. The next day, I let Hilda stay home from school with my parents and went to submit my resignation to the company. Just the thought of working in the same place as those two made me nauseous.
Thank you for everything.
The accounting department was in an uproar over the sudden resignation. I was indebted to the people in accounting, so I discreetly explained the situation and asked them to keep it a secret from the other employees. The accounting staff who heard the story went pale and were shaking for some reason, saying how could they? After submitting my resignation, I left work early and headed to the house I lived in with Kent, along with my parents and Hilda. Everyone worked together to move our belongings to my parents' house. There wasn't that much stuff, so we finished packing in a few hours. I wonder if Kent will be shocked to see the empty house when he gets back.
Well, not that I really care.
And we left the house we had lived in for many years. 1 week later, I was still working at the same company as Kent. I wanted to quit immediately if possible, but I had to hand over my work and finish remaining tasks. The earliest I could resign was a month later. I tried my best to avoid running into Kent and Regina, and continued working quietly. But that afternoon, the accounting department head told me the president was calling for me. I tilted my head, wondering what it could be about as I headed to the president's office.
Excuse me.
I knocked and opened the door to the president's office. There I found the president looking furious, Kent with a pale face. And for some reason, my dad was there.
Dad? What are you doing here?
But before he could answer my question, Kent shouted at me in a tearful voice.
Why didn't you tell me your dad is a major shareholder in our company and the president's best friend?
Oh, did I not mention that? That's right. My dad has been friends with our company president since they were kids, and they consider each other their closest friends. Dad bought a large amount of shares to support the president when he started the company. And he's still a major shareholder in our company now. He owns some land in this area, and he manages that land to earn a bit of money. He was a regular salaryman until he retired, but thanks to that, our family is quite well off. That's the background to how he can be a major shareholder in the company. When I graduated from college and was looking for a job, there was a major recession going on, and I was having trouble finding employment. When I consulted my dad about it, he introduced me to this company. That's a good company. They should be able to overcome this recession too. Trusting his words, I got a job at this company. I did take the employment exam, but it was practically thanks to Dad's connections that I was able to join. So after joining the company, I made this request to the president.
Just because I'm his daughter, you don't need to give me special treatment. As long as I can get a reasonable salary, that's enough. I have no interest in promotions either. I'd just be grateful to have a place in a corner of this company.
The president, understanding my feelings, treated me as just another employee while I was working. By the way, only a very small number of employees know about my connection to the president. The accounting department staff know, but I wonder if they turned pale when I submitted my resignation because they were worried it would somehow impact the company, since I, who have ties to the president, was resigning for an outrageous reason. I don't have that much influence myself, though. Incidentally, the reason I never told Kent about this was because I thought his attitude might change if he found out I was the daughter of a shareholder. Early in our relationship, I was afraid his attitude would change, so I couldn't tell him about it. And so I ended up never mentioning it, and here we are. Well, it's not like there were any issues from not telling him all this time, and I figured there wouldn't be any problems going forward either. Or rather, I had completely forgotten about it. My dad is a major shareholder, but he doesn't interfere with the management of the company. He doesn't even attend shareholder meetings, so he has a surprisingly low profile for a major shareholder.
And that's the situation.
After I explained the whole story, Kent's face turned from blue to white. Seeing Kent like that, Dad let out a huge sigh.
I had no intention of interfering in your affairs at all. If you two had an amicable divorce, I probably wouldn't have even contacted Scott, your president.
As he said Scott, my dad looked at the president, his best friend and one of his own.
However, you hurt my precious daughter. I absolutely cannot forgive that, so I decided to make a big deal out of it and get this guy involved.
The president gave a small nod at Dad's words and replied,
It's not that I don't trust my best friend's word, but it was just such an unbelievable thing from a common sense standpoint. I mean, who would have thought an employee in an office romance would cheat with someone over a decade younger than him? It's unthinkable with any common sense. So we conducted an internal investigation, and unfortunately, it was confirmed that your affair was real.
The president sighed in exasperation as he said that. His eyes looking at Kent contained a hint of contempt. My dad was also glaring at Kent with cold eyes.
It would be unfair for this idiot not to face any punishment.
Indeed it would. The two best friends nodded in perfect unison. And then the president declared to Kent,
You're fired, Mr. Ingram.
At this, Kent made a shocked face and immediately retorted,
Wait a minute. Why am I being fired? Because I had an affair and disrupted workplace discipline? If you fire me for a reason like that, it will make your company look bad.
A reason like that, those aren't words he has any right to say. Besides, I feel like keeping an employee who cheated on his wife and child with a much younger woman would be worse for the company's image. Retorts toward Kent were popping into my head one after another, but before I could open my mouth, the president replied with a big sigh.
There's one more thing that came to light as we proceeded with the internal investigation. Mr. Ingram, you embezzled company funds, didn't you?
This was news to both me and my dad, and we both widened our eyes in surprise. The president's face held exasperation mixed with anger, while Kent was breaking out in a cold sweat all over at the sudden accusation.
Oh, and just so you know, you can't talk your way out of this. I have solid evidence in my possession. Why did you embezzle funds? Could it be that you used company money to play around with your mistress?
Kent was at a loss for words at the president's pointed question. He had probably hit the nail on the head. Come to think of it, Regina, who came to our house the other day, was decked out in brand-name items from head to toe. I had felt it was odd that she, who had just changed jobs and was still young, was wearing so many expensive things, but Kent had probably bought those for her, using money he stole from the company.
And apparently you've been taking a lot of unauthorized absences and showing up late recently too. Even without the embezzlement and affair, your reputation within the company had already fallen significantly.
He was probably neglecting his work because he was too absorbed in his affair with her. I couldn't help but look at him, who was being far too selfish, with eyes of contempt.
Good grief, not only an affair, but criminal acts too. Hey Scott, we're definitely going to consult the police about this, right?
Yeah. Actually, I've already consulted with them. When the word police came up, Kent apologized profusely on the spot, shedding beads of nervous sweat.
I am terribly sorry. It was just a momentary lapse.
Huh, so you embezzled funds on a momentary impulse? Could it be that your affair was also just a whim? And hurting my daughter and granddaughter was just a careless mistake, not your true intentions? Well then, I suppose it can't be helped. Did you think I would say that? Anger that couldn't be suppressed seeped into my dad's voice. When Kent looked at him while trembling, my dad had a demonic expression unlike any I had ever seen.
That's not it. The affair wasn't my fault. Hallie stopped giving me attention, so I got lonely, and…
Even now, Kent was still trying to somehow justify himself as not being in the wrong. Seeing his pathetic figure, I was disgusted with my own lack of discernment, wondering why I ever married this man. Suppressing the urge to hold my head in my hands, I refuted his excuses. I was too busy every day to give you attention. I mean, you never helped with any housework or child-rearing at all. You couldn't even clear your own dishes after eating, could you? That's right, he left even his personal matters entirely up to me. He must have thought that if he stayed silent, I would do everything for him. Even when Hilda was little, I once told Kent you could at least clear your own dishes after eating. But Kent replied, "Ugh, what a pain. Isn't that kind of thing a woman's job?" Unlike you, I work in the super busy most important department. Let me relax at home at least. At that point, I realized it was a waste of time to say anything to this man.
Wasn't it hard enough just taking care of Hilda? But I had to take care of you too. And yet, you had an affair because you were lonely, you say? How incredibly selfish can you be?
His shoulders shook in surprise at my shouting. I had never gotten this angry at him before. Because I thought it was pointless to get angry. At this point, it's futile to say anything to this man, no matter what. When I think that if I had divorced him as soon as I realized that Hilda might not have gotten hurt that day, I feel angry at my own error in judgment. I wonder what your mistress will do if you get sued by the company and fired. Oh, of course I'm going to sue you and your mistress for alimony. Even if you lose your job and have no money after compensating for the embezzlement, I will sue you mercilessly. Your mistress did say it was totally fine for me to sue for alimony after all. In response to this, Kent made a surprised face and then deeply apologized to me.
Please don't divorce me, I'm begging you. I'll break up with Regina right away. I'll never cheat again from now on, so please. Forgive me.
It's too late. I already submitted the divorce papers. That day, after leaving Hilda with my parents, I went to the municipal office and filed the divorce papers. They were successfully accepted, so I am no longer in Ingram. We are already just strangers to each other. But he continued in a panicked tone, disregarding all that.
Then let's remarry right now. Hilda is still little. She'd be better off with a dad, right? I'm sure Hilda thinks so too.
The instant I heard those words, my anger exploded.
How dare you say that?
Unable to contain my rage, I slammed my fist down on the desk in front of me. A loud bang rang out, and my dad and the president looked at me with startled faces.
You said this right in front of Hilda while getting intimate with your mistress. That Hilda doesn't get attached to you, and lately she's not cute at all, just like me. Can you imagine how much those words hurt Hilda? You have no right to call yourself a dad.
Hearing this, Dad's expression turned demonic again.
You bastard. You said that to my precious granddaughter? And in front of Hilda too. How could you do such a thing?
The president also glared at him with an angry look.
I have a grandchild around the same age. Just imagining my adorable grandchild going through the same thing makes my blood boil.
Kent looked at me, my dad, and the president. Everyone's faces showed anger and contempt toward Kent. No one here was on his side.
That's not it. I didn't do anything wrong. Shut up. Yelp.
Kent let out a pathetic cry at my shout.
All you can do is shut up and atone for your crimes. Don't ever call yourself Hilda's dad again. If you try to get involved with Hilda in the future, I'll use any means necessary to remove you from her life.
My seriousness must have gotten through to him, because his expression turned to one of despair. Finally realizing he was losing everything, his position, his money, his family, he suddenly collapsed on the spot, his energy spent. I drove the final nail in the coffin for him.
You were blathering on about how it's better for Hilda to have a dad too, right? Well, Hilda said she hates you. She was absolutely thrilled when she found out I was divorcing you and cutting ties. No way. She doesn't need a dad. A sweet child like her doesn't need the worst scum like you.
When I informed him that he was thoroughly despised even by his own daughter, he started crying, tears streaming down his face. But all of this was he just desserts.
You don't even have the right to be hurt.
Kent listened to my words, hanging his head powerlessly. After that, the president promptly fired Kent. Apparently, it had leaked out from somewhere that he embezzled funds, that he cheated with the receptionist, and that I had connections to the president.
I've asked Mrs. Ingram from accounting to fix an invoice I messed up because it was a hassle, acting all high and mighty. I've also taken out my frustration on Mrs. Ingram when she pointed out my mistakes.
My appearance is that of an ordinary female employee. I'm not flashy, but rather plain, and usually can't talk back when spoken to forcefully. Perhaps because of that, there are quite a few employees who have a condescending attitude toward me. Centering on those employees, the people who found out my true identity apparently turned pale and started trembling. Well, I'm quitting the company anyway, and I have no intention of doing anything to them at this point, but I just hope this makes them reflect and fix their attitudes of looking down on others. As for Kent's embezzlement, it seems Regina was also an accomplice. Before long, she was also given notice of termination. The president had consulted the police about her case as well. Also, when her parents found out about this incident, she was apparently kicked out of her family home where she was living. Since she was a big spender with hardly any savings, rumor has it she borrowed immediate living expenses from a shady consumer finance company. Regina sought help from people at the company, but there was no one there who would assist a criminal. With no one to help her, she seemed to be driven into a corner. Some time later, the two were arrested by the police. It was briefly covered on the local news, but quickly got buried under other news stories, and the incident faded from everyone's memory. By the way, before he was arrested, Kent called me.
Please, let's start over. I'm truly reflecting on what happened and have had a change of heart. I'll never do something this stupid again.
After divorcing him and going through the procedures to claim alimony, I had blocked all his contact information. However, he purposely used a different mobile phone to contact me.
Truly reflecting? April Fool's Day was ages ago. I can't believe a word a vile person like you says. Then what do I have to do for you to believe me?
As Kent got slightly worked up on the other end of the phone, I vaguely thought in the back of my mind that people don't change that easily. Just then, someone snatched my mobile phone from the side.
Hilda!
Hilda brought the phone to her face, expressionless. "Hello, Dad, long time no talk."
Hilda!
Kent let out a happy voice. Even though he had called Hilda not cute, his voice was filled with genuine joy. However, in contrast to Kent's delighted voice, Hilda replied coldly,
"Don't ever call Mom again." Huh? You still don't get it? We both hate you. I think it's really great that Mom divorced you. Every day is so much fun now that you're gone.
What she was saying was true. After divorcing Kent and moving into my parents' house, the smile on her face increased. Seeing that smile made me finally realize just how stressful living with Kent had been for Hilda. I still regret not divorcing him much earlier.
I don't want to see your face or hear your voice. I don't even want to call you Dad anymore. If you understand, never contact us again.
Kent was at a loss for words on the other end of the phone after being thoroughly rejected by Hilda herself. He probably never thought he would be hated to this extent.
So with that said, don't get involved with us anymore. If you contact us again, I'll consult a lawyer to deal with it.
Leaving that parting remark, I ended the call. To be safe, I blocked the number he called from.
Hey, he won't call anymore?
I put on a smile to reassure Hilda, who asked in an anxious voice. He'll never call again. When I replied like that, she murmured good and showed a relieved smile. Since then, Kent never called or tried to contact us again. Maybe it was because he heard the word lawyer, or maybe he had too much on his plate with the police getting involved. Or perhaps he was struggling financially from paying the alimony settlement and didn't have the leeway. Well, whatever situation he has fallen into, it has nothing to do with me and Hilda anymore. Currently, Hilda and I are living comfortably at my parents' house. Thanks to my parents taking care of Hilda, it's made things much easier for me. After quitting that company, I quickly found a job at a company close to my parents' home. Thanks to the accounting experience I built up at my previous company, I was able to become a full-time employee even at this age. However, I can't keep relying on my parents forever.
I'm thinking it's about time to move out and find a place for just me and Hilda to live.
I said that intending to consult Dad, who also runs a real estate business and is knowledgeable about that kind of thing, but Dad replied in a fluster.
What are you saying? I want you two to keep living in this house forever. Both Sierra and I want to always be with Hilda. If there's anything you're unhappy with, I'll fix it, so please don't say you're moving out.
He said that with the intensity of someone about to cling to me, which flustered me too, so I ended up replying.
Oh, okay, I get it. I won't say I'm moving out. Let us stay in this house forever.
So because of that, my dad is making preparations to transfer the house and land to my name. Well, if that makes my parents happy, I intend to graciously accept and continue living in this house. Hilda also seems happy surrounded by her beloved grandparents, and seeing her smile makes me feel blessed every day. A lot happened and it was tough, but I don't regret the path I chose. From now on, I'm willing to do anything for the sake of her smile.
Ah, feels so refreshing. Revived.
Ensley, my sister-in-law, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, came over to our place and sprawled out on the air-conditioned living room sofa, as usual. My daughter Mirinda, who was doing her homework, frowned in annoyance.
Let's see, haven't finished your summer project yet, have you?
Ensley peered over at the summer plan. I remember those days. With summer projects, you never really know what to do, right? In that regard, Mirinda, I'm kinda envious of you.
What do you mean?
Mirinda asked, puzzled.
Well, not many kids are born with such an interesting face like you. How about you compile something about that challenge of yours? LOL. It'd be easy, right?
Mirinda was born with a rare condition called cleft lip and palate, which resulted in splits in her upper lip and palate. She had undergone numerous surgeries over the years, but more than anything, it was the stares from others that hurt her the most. The condition made her face asymmetrical from her mouth to her nose, and the ignorant stares were painfully sharp. Why am I the only one like this? Mirinda had tearfully asked before. I couldn't stay silent at Ensley's incredibly insensitive remark.
Ensley. Even if we're family, there are things you should and shouldn't say. I was just stating the facts. If she compiles something about her interesting condition, everyone will be pleased, won't they?
Ensley is laughing, saying Mirinda's condition is interesting. Without knowing how much pain and struggle Mirinda and we have gone through.
Don't worry about what she says, Mirinda.
I grabbed Ensley's arm, ready to forcefully drag her out of the house. That's when Mirinda stood up slowly, smiling, and said,
Don't worry, Mom, I've decided.
My name is Eleanor. I live with my elementary school-aged daughter Mirinda. My husband Dennis is a good husband and father, but he's away on work assignment.
I'm home, Mom. I'll go wash my hands, then I'll help with chopping the vegetables.
Saying this, Mirinda took off her mask. Nowadays, everyone wears masks when going out due to the pandemic. But Mirinda has been wearing a mask in front of anyone other than family since she was young. She must still feel resistance to showing her bare face. Mirinda was born with a condition called cleft lip and palate, which is not commonly known. It's a congenital condition where the upper lip and palate are split, occurring in about 1 in 1,000 births in the United States. Seeing our child for the first time, my husband and I were shocked but also vowed to protect her no matter what. Cleft lip and palate requires several surgeries, and Mirinda's first surgery was just 2 months after she was born. Though the surgery closed her mouth, it didn't completely correct the distortion in her mouth and nose. Most people don't know much about this condition, which made me worried about how Mirinda would be perceived as she grew up. There would surely be times when Mirinda would get hurt. Still, Dennis and I discussed letting Mirinda live like any other child, attending school and going to amusement parks just like her peers. The days of hospital visits must have been painful for young Mirinda, who usually doesn't complain much. Mirinda would become anxious before surgery, saying, "Mom." There must have been unspeakable anxiety clinging to her. She wouldn't let go of my hand until she fell asleep. As an elementary student, Mirinda would come home and share various school events with laughter.
Today, Gerald in my class mimicked the teacher, and it was so funny. During lunch, we played rock, paper, scissors to see who gets the dessert of the kid who was absent, and Caitlin won. Over the last long weekend, Tyrone from the next class went on a vacation with his family. But their dad got lost while driving, and it was a huge mess.
Mirinda would tell fun stories at dinner every day, but I noticed something off. None of the stories Mirinda told included herself. Mirinda always just tells me about things others have said or done. She never mentions doing anything with a friend herself. Despite a bad feeling, I lacked the courage to directly ask her about it. One day in 2nd grade, Mirinda came home crying.
What's wrong? What happened?
Seeing Mirinda cry, except before surgeries, surprised me. Mirinda was silent, looking frustrated, but then she couldn't hold back anymore and started crying louder.
It's okay, you can cry all you want.
I hugged my daughter tightly. After calming down, Mirinda said, "You know, Mom," and shared feelings she had kept to herself. Even though Mirinda wears a mask to school to hide her mouth and nose's distortions, she has to remove it during lunchtime. The first time they ate together, a boy sitting across from her pointed and laughed, saying, "Your face looks weird." That started it, and other kids gathered around, saying, "Really? That's funny," expressing their thoughts aloud. The teacher quickly scolded everyone, "Back to your seats," settling the situation. But from that day, Mirinda felt ostracized, unable to join any friend's circle. She had been enduring this for over a year. "Why did you keep silent until now?" "Because, Mom and Dad, you always have it tough because of my condition, right? Surgeries cost a lot of money, and you have to go back and forth between the hospital and home for me. Mirinda, for US." Knowing Mirinda was considerate of us made me feel inadequate as a parent. Why am I the only one like this? Tears fell again from Mirinda's eyes after she finished speaking. "I'm sorry, Mirinda. Despite being blameless, she's had a hard time at school. Not just school. Mirinda might continue to be seen strangely by others because of her condition. I blamed myself, feeling responsible for her suffering." "I'm sorry, Mirinda. From now on, Mom promises to be by your side as much as possible to protect you. Even for busy Dad at work, I'll be with you." I hugged Mirinda again tightly. When I told Dennis after he came home, "It's hard not being there when you're going through tough times. I've let you handle all the hardship alone," Dennis also blamed himself. "It can't be helped. I'll protect Mirinda's heart, and you protect our livelihood. Let's protect Mirinda together." Yes, we should. We vowed again to protect our daughter. From that day, I quit my job at the apparel company and became a housewife. In 3rd grade, Mirinda underwent her 4th surgery. While the first 3 surgeries were minor corrections, the 4th involved transplanting bone from her pelvis to her upper jaw. It was more extensive than before, but it made the distortion from her mouth to her nose less noticeable, making her look no different from other children. However, having bone removed from her pelvis made walking difficult for Mirinda, forcing her into a wheelchair for a while. Still, Mirinda would look at her face in the hand mirror and ask with a bright, radiant smile never seen before, "Hey, Mom. Do I look prettier now?" Seeing my daughter happy and smiling without feeling self-conscious made me happy too. "Yes, you're very pretty, Mirinda." I brushed her hair and spoke to her. After a while, Mirinda began serious walking rehabilitation. She almost fell during the unfamiliar rehab, but when I tried to help, "Just watch, Mom," she scolded me. Holding onto the handrail, Mirinda grimaced with each step, "This is nothing. My face looks proper pretty now." Lucky, right, never showing any signs of weakness. "Does it hurt? Are you okay?" I couldn't help but worry and wanted to support her physically. "If you always support me, Mom, there's no point in rehab." Mirinda laughed shyly. As a result of her positive attitude towards rehab, the pain in her hips completely vanished, and she could walk on her own without needing crutches anymore. 2 years later, Mirinda was in 5th grade. There were still scars on her lips, but they were hardly noticeable and less mentioned. It seems Mirinda has grown to like looking at her face in the mirror. Upon waking up, she heads straight to the bathroom and faces herself in the mirror with a smile. She used to dislike even approaching a mirror. The memory of those times feels like a distant past, making me chuckle to myself. "I wish I could see Dad." Mirinda sighed. Dennis has been on a work assignment far away. We sometimes communicate via video calls, but it's not the same as having him nearby. Sherry said her family is going on an overseas trip. Frederick is going camping. Everyone seems so lucky. Despite it being summer vacation, Mirinda lamented not being able to go anywhere due to our circumstances. One day, while we were spending a holiday at home, the doorbell suddenly rang. I'll get it. Mirinda stopped her summer homework in the living room and headed to the entrance, as I was busy with household chores and couldn't leave them. What, Aunt again? You came back? I could hear Mirinda's displeased voice.
How rude. You came back? I'm your aunt, after all. Family can visit as many times as they want, right?
Saying so, the visitor entered the house without waiting for Mirinda's consent.
It's cool here. Revived.
I poked my head out from the balcony and welcomed the guest half-heartedly. Welcome, Ensley. The guest was Ensley, Dennis's sister. According to Dennis, after graduating from high school, Ensley worked as an office clerk at a small trading company but ended up quitting within 3 months after being reprimanded by a senior for taking too many days off and getting into a heated argument. Now, she's living back at home.
Dad told me she doesn't even bother to look at job ads he shows her. Just throws them on the floor and spends all day playing video games.
Dennis complained about Ensley's lack of motivation. Ensley just sat down on the sofa as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As Mirinda tried to return to her homework, Ensley, fanning her sweaty shirt front to catch some air, exclaimed, "It's so hot. This weather is absolutely crazy." Ensley loudly exclaimed, disregarding Mirinda, who was trying to study. When Mirinda frowned in annoyance, Ensley did not miss it. "Am I bothering you, niece?" she asked with a creepy smile, intentionally disturbing Mirinda. Mirinda just sighed without engaging, knowing from experience that arguing would only encourage Ensley to be more annoying.
"Mirinda, I'd like something cold. Auntie's thirsty,"
Ensley said in a cloying voice and hugged Mirinda. "Please stay away, it's hot." Mirinda pushed Ensley away with a calm voice as she tried to lean on her, and Ensley clicked her tongue.
"What's with you? No charm at all. Eleanor, don't you have something to drink?"
I took out coffee from the fridge, poured it into a cup, and handed it to Ensley.
"Could you keep it down a bit? Mirinda is studying."
I admonished Ensley in a low voice, though I knew it was futile.
"You know, I always wonder."
Ensley looked around the room and poked Mirinda's cheek with her finger, asking, "Why doesn't Mirinda study in her own room?" Seeing Mirinda swat her hand away, Ensley laughed as if amused.
"To save on electricity,"
Mirinda answered irritably.
"Saving on electricity. So that's why you're scrimping? Mom isn't working, right? That's why you guys are poor."
Mirinda slammed her hand on the table in frustration.
"Don't compare me to someone who doesn't work despite being old enough." "Are you talking about me?" "Wow, Mirinda, that's harsh. Your mom doesn't work outside either. Always lazing around at home just like me, right?" "That's not true. Mom is busy being a housewife. She's always cooking, cleaning, doing laundry. There's a lot to do. She's not lazy like Aunt,"
Mirinda retorted with a firm stance.
"Really? Even Mirinda is being cold to me? Listen, my parents are like, if you want to use the air conditioner so much, pay the high electricity bill yourself. Can you believe that? Living with family and they say that? It's your own fault for not working and just lazing around and playing in your room all the time." "Well, it's not like I can pay for that. Going to cafes costs money, department stores are far and a hassle. So in the end, the only place I can rely on is Mirinda's house."
Despite Mirinda's reluctance, Ensley hugged her again. This is how Ensley would come over unannounced, trampling over our lives every time. Even though she's Dennis's sister, I couldn't bring myself to forcefully kick her out. When I consult Dennis, who's away on his own, he says, "Kick her out immediately. If it comes to it, calling the police is fine." But she's still family, and I couldn't bring myself to do that. Taking advantage of my inability to stand firm, Ensley has been getting increasingly bold lately. Anyway, Eleanor, you've got it easy, right? Because you can just play around at home every day. I'm not taking it easy at all. I snapped back at Ensley, irritated. After engaging more than I should have, I calmed down and realized I shouldn't have. Predictably, Ensley got even more encouraged. It's fine to slack off, right? Just buy whatever you like from the grocery store for meals, and for cleaning, just quickly tidy up the places that catch the eye. That's what I would do, LOL. She suggested I take shortcuts in my role as a housewife.
Don't compare me with Aunt. Besides, it's annoying because of her I can't concentrate on my studies. Can you just go home?
Miranda protested strongly. Oh, scary. Ensley exaggeratedly shivered.
So, Miranda, what have you been studying? Should I help you? I might be able to teach you addition or subtraction.
I've already learned that, thank you. Please, just go home. Oh. What's this? Your summer project isn't finished yet. Ensley peered over at Miranda's planner. I remember those days. With summer projects, you never really know what to do, right? It's hard to find something you actually want to research. In that regard, Miranda, I'm kinda envious.
What do you mean? Well, not many kids are born with such an interesting face like you. Why don't you compile something about that condition? It'd be easy, right? LOL. It's about yourself, so you wouldn't have to research much.
I couldn't stay silent at my sister-in-law's incredibly insensitive remark.
Enough, Ensley. There are things you should and shouldn't say, even if we're family. Oh, scary, scary. I was just stating the facts. If she compiles something about her interesting condition, everyone will be pleased, won't they?
Ensley is calling Miranda's condition interesting. Laughing, without knowing how much pain and suffering Miranda and we have gone through. Miranda, don't worry about what such a person says. I grabbed Ensley's arm, trying to drag her out of the house with all my might. That's when Miranda stood up slowly and said with a smile, Don't worry, Mom. I've decided. In contrast to me, who was about to explode with anger, Miranda was completely calm. Well then, Miranda, I don't quite understand, but your mom seems really angry, so I'll leave. Ensley said without a shred of remorse, smirking creepily as she prepared to leave. I wanted to unleash my anger on her, but Miranda pulled at the hem of my shirt, stopping me. You too, Mom, shouldn't worry about what that person says. Looking at the suddenly quiet entrance after Ensley left, Miranda spoke. She must have some plan in mind. Thinking this, I managed to suppress my anger. 3 months passed. Miranda, it's okay to relax a bit. Saying that, the national newspaper reporter eased the slightly tense expression on Miranda's face. Dressed in new clothes bought for this day, Miranda smiled with confidence. That's the spirit. You're doing great. Praised by the handsome reporter, Miranda's cheeks flushed slightly. 3 months ago, I couldn't have imagined Miranda being interviewed by a national newspaper. The interview took place in a small cafe in the neighborhood, which we had reserved. The owner, who I've known for a long time, whispered to me, Hasn't Miranda become quite beautiful? Indeed, the last time the owner saw Miranda was before her 4th surgery. As Miranda's mother, always watching her closely, it was hard for me to notice. But acquaintances who saw her without a mask after a long time were often surprised. Miranda's treatment had progressed so much that her facial structure from her mouth to her nose was indistinguishable from other children's. Of course, some surgery scars remained, but they were hardly noticeable unless pointed out. Let's take one last photo. Smile. Prompted by the reporter, Mirinda smiled broadly without her mask. 3 months ago, on the night Ensley left, Mirinda declared to me,
"I've decided on my summer project theme. I want everyone to know about me. I'll do what Aunt suggested."
She didn't seem bothered by Ensley's words. In fact, she seemed more radiant than before.
"Is that okay with you, Mirinda?" I asked.
Laughing a little, Mirinda said, "Mom, you're always overprotective. I'm not the crybaby I used to be. This is something I've decided to do myself." Seeing my daughter so full of confidence, I felt reassured. "All right, then I won't stop you. Go ahead as you think is best, Mirinda."
"Okay, got it."
From that day, Mirinda began to confront her condition of cleft lip and palate again. Shortly after starting elementary school, she had been teased by classmates about the shape of her nose and mouth. Suffering in silence because she couldn't tell her parents. She compiled the numerous surgeries she underwent and the teasing into a booklet, including photos from those times. There's one photo that is particularly meaningful to me. It was taken the day Mirinda first opened up to us about the mean things said at school. Although she protested, "No, don't take a picture," I took it anyway.
"Why did you take a photo?"
She protested tearfully, but I hugged her tightly. "Someday, we'll look back at this day and laugh, Mirinda." At the time, Mirinda couldn't understand and just cried out of frustration. Afterward, we discussed why people hold such prejudices. We concluded that prejudice stems from ignorance. Indeed, cleft lip and palate is a rare condition, affecting 1 in 1,000 people. But with ongoing treatment, one's appearance can become indistinguishable from others. We hoped that more people knowing about the condition and its treatment would reduce the instances of patients being viewed strangely. That became our family's unified wish. In advancing her summer project, Mirinda set up a special website and conducted a survey for children suffering from the same condition and their parents. This revealed that other families, like ours, were troubled and pained by prejudice. Good luck, Mirinda. You're very brave. If there's anything we can do, just let us know. I realized Mirinda had many supportive comrades suffering from the same condition. Mom, thank you for giving birth to me. Thank you for raising me. Because you supported me, I was able to get this far. Mirinda whispered, looking at the photo. The hard worker is you, I replied. Mirinda had undergone numerous surgeries since she was very young. Especially the 4th surgery, which involved transplanting bone from her pelvis to her upper jaw, was the most challenging, leaving her unable to walk on her own for a while, but she never complained. She is truly a strong child. Of course, I feel like hiding my face with a mask. But I've come to think that this unique aspect of mine could be considered cool. Mirinda said confidently. A month after summer vacation ended, Mirinda came home from school and said, "Look. My summer project was highly praised at school, and I was awarded this certificate." She showed me the certificate, breathless and sweaty from her excitement.
"My friend said I was cool."
Mirinda happily shared her school experiences. A month after that, a newspaper company contacted us for an interview.
I read the interview article. "Mirinda, you're amazing."
Mirinda's article was published in a national newspaper, catching the eye of Dennis, who was on a work assignment. He immediately video called us.
"If you were going to be published, you could have told me." I was just reading the newspaper when suddenly I see Mirinda's face all over it. And I spit out the coffee I was drinking from surprise. It wouldn't have been fun if I told you beforehand. I wanted to see your reaction without saying anything first.
So, I fell for the surprise, huh? Dennis laughed heartily over the video call. Miranda peeked out and said, "Are you happy to see your daughter's face after so long, Dad?" "Well, yes. But you really gathered courage to compile something about your condition, didn't you?" Then, Miranda's smile faded, and she answered seriously, "I presented it because I wanted to reduce the number of people who, like Aunt, say hurtful things out of ignorance about diseases and disabilities."
Ensley? Did she say something to you?
We revealed the hurtful things Ensley had said to Miranda during her summer visit.
That girl.
Dennis sighed. "I'll give her a piece of my mind." The next day, we received a call from Mael.
"I read Miranda's article. It's amazing, Miranda. But I heard Ensley said terrible things. Dennis called me yesterday, and I was shocked."
Luke is furious. He's been saying he won't forgive Ensley since yesterday. I'm worried his blood pressure might go up. But Ensley really is trouble, Mael said, promising to make Ensley apologize soon. A few days later, Ensley came to visit as promised.
"Are you there? If you are, come out already."
She banged on the door so hard I worried it might break, not seeming like she came to apologize but rather irritated. When I went to answer, there stood Ensley, looking devilish.
"What are you doing on your own?"
She protested, not apologizing but complaining instead. I had no idea why Ensley was so angry. When I remained silent, thanks to your daughter stirring things up, I got yelled at by my parents and bro. Now I feel uncomfortable at home. "How are you going to take responsibility?" she demanded. Apparently, Ensley had been severely scolded by my in-laws and Dennis because of Miranda's project. But I thought it was all Ensley's fault. Unable to hold back my anger at Ensley's lack of remorse, I exploded.
"Enough, Ensley. If you're not here to apologize, please leave."
I finally let out the anger I had been holding back, even to Ensley, who kept repeating her arrogant attitude. For the first time, I openly protested, leaving Ensley momentarily taken aback.
"Whether you're my husband's sister or whoever, anyone who hurts my precious daughter is not family. Don't come to our house again. You're nothing but trouble." "What? Getting angry all of a sudden? Silly. Even though I came to apologize, you're kicking me out." "Fine then. I'll tell the family you're a stubborn DIL, just remember that."
Miranda interjected while listening beside me. "Aunt, I'm recording our conversation, so lying is useless. It'll be found out soon anyway," she said, admonishing Ensley like a child who won't listen. "Oh well. I guess I'll forgive you just for today then." With those final words, Ensley left with a pale face.
"Ah, that feels so much better."
Now in 5th grade, Miranda seems more mature than ever to me. She never used to complain, not because she didn't want to but because she didn't want to worry us. But now, it's different. Miranda isn't holding back tears anymore. She doesn't even feel the need to cry because she's become so strong and resilient. Looking at Miranda's serene profile, I couldn't help but feel a bit reflective. Maybe I've been too worried about her. With the sole intention of not letting her feel lonely, I quit my job to always be there for her. But it seems Miranda is fine now. Without me realizing, she has grown up and surrounded herself with many strong allies. Lately, she's been bringing school friends home more frequently.
"What, is there something on my face?"
Miranda noticed my gaze and looked at me questioningly. "Yes, lots of happiness."
"What? That makes no sense."
Laughing at my response, Miranda seemed amused. Feeling her growth, I decided to rejoin the workforce at an apparel company I had been invited to rejoin. "Eleanor, I read the newspaper. Miranda did great, didn't she? Every time my coworkers mentioned it, I calmly responded, she probably doesn't think she did anything extraordinary. She just presented her life as it is. One evening, Mirinda shared her future dreams with me.
I want to become a doctor. To help children and families suffering from diseases and disabilities like mine. Facing myself through my summer project made me think that. And I've been thinking lately, there are people who can't run fast, those who struggle with studies. Tall people, short people. My condition is just another trait among those.
Hearing her aspirations, I felt hopeful for her future.
Oh, and by the way, a boy in my class told me he likes me.
Mirinda casually mentioned her dream and then shared this news. Reporting this to Dennis via video call, he panicked.
What? Isn't it too early for her to be in a relationship? Hey, are you okay with this?
Calm down, my dear husband. I calmed down the frantically panicking Dennis. The fact that a boy confessed to Mirinda probably means that the kids around her have stopped caring about her condition. As for Ensley, I heard she was kicked out by Dennis and the in-laws. Ensley, who had been lazing around at home every day without working part-time, finally decided to become independent after losing financial support. In reality, she had no choice but to do so. Now, she struggles with living alone in a small, old apartment, earning a little from part-time work. The wish Mirinda had for her summer project, to reduce ignorant and hurtful comments about diseases and disabilities, is also my wish. Of course, 1 or 2 actions alone won't change the world. But that's exactly why we, who know the struggles and pain, must continue to spread the truth to the world. I vowed in my heart to continue watching over Mirinda, ensuring her growth isn't hindered. Dennis has decided to return from his assignment. Dennis convinced his boss to allow him to work predominantly remotely. I won't let you two feel lonely again, he said. But then, you came back because you're worried Mirinda might get a boyfriend, aren't you?
That's not the case,
Dennis awkwardly responded. Anyway, we're back to living happily and closely as a family of 3. A family that's always full of laughter, our pride and joy. My daughter Sharon's husband Christopher suddenly said with a sly smile,
I want to take this opportunity and discuss this with you. I had a DNA test taken because I thought she didn't look like me. And it turns out she's not my daughter.
Christopher said, so pointing at my granddaughter Tiana, who was being held by Sharon. I made an eye contact with my husband Dylan while Christopher was unable to hide his smirk. I figured as much. I was disappointed, but anger quickly overtook me.
So you've been cheating on me behind my back? You bastard. Were you having an affair with one of the fathers who picks up their kids from daycare?
His raised voice caught the attention of those around us. I felt truly sorry. I still wanted to believe in him.
A woman like this is totally untrustworthy. Divorce. I want a divorce.
Sharon seemed unable to comprehend Christopher's sudden change. Tiana, sensing something was wrong, started crying and her cries echoing around us. I couldn't believe he was this kind of person. I felt an anger towards him like I had never felt before for neglecting my daughter. Looking over at Dylan, I saw him with an angry expression, fists clenched. This was our only chance. I exchanged glances with Dylan, then took out a photo we had prepared in advance. This photo was our trump card. With hands trembling with anger, I held up the photo in front of Christopher. My name is Violet. I'm a 55-year-old housewife. I live a commonplace life, but I cherish the certain happiness I feel and value the peaceful family life I have. My family consists of my husband Dylan, who currently works at a travel agency, my daughter Sharon, a nursery teacher, and my granddaughter Tiana. We are a family of 4. Until recently, Christopher, Sharon's husband, who's also an assistant director who works at a TV station, lived with us. When he was still in this house, I never dreamed we would end up living separately. Our current life goes back to when I met Dylan. Meeting Dylan was a story from decades ago. Back then, it was common for our marriages to be arranged by our parents. He was 5 years older, in the prime of his career at a travel agency. He had a manly and serious look about him, which left a good impression on me. Due to his job, he was knowledgeable about geography all over the world. I remember him talking excitedly about the charms of various tourist destinations over dinner. Holding a glass of beer in his hand, he said with enthusiasm, "My favorite place is definitely the pyramids of Egypt. It's what I recommend most to customers. The pyramids, made of limestone, used to shine white, reflecting the sun when they were first built." His carefree smile like a little boy stirred something in my heart. Seeing him like that, I wanted to sit next to him and hear more. "I would love for you to take me to your recommended places, Dylan." To that he responded with a smile. "Leave it to me." That's how we hit it off, starting a relationship with marriage in mind. Dylan was busy with work, but he always made time for me. His experience in a travel agency showed in how perfectly he planned our dates and trips. I wanted to walk through life with this man. After a few months of dating, I was convinced that we could make a married life work. "Please marry me. I want to see the pyramids with you on our honeymoon." It was an unplanned proposal. He stared at me wide-eyed for a few seconds, then broke into a broad smile. "Of course. Thank you."
Really? I'm sorry I made you say it.
Thus, having confirmed our feelings for each other, we officially pledged our love at our wedding a few months later. True to our promise, we went to Egypt to see the pyramids on our honeymoon. That scenery will never fade in my mind, even after many years. In the midst of what could be called the pinnacle of happiness, our daughter Sharon was born. Life with a child passed surprisingly quickly, and before we knew it, Sharon had grown up and become a respectable nursery teacher. Sharon, who always loved children, seemed fulfilled, even though she was often busy with the kids at the nursery. Through her work, she started talking about wanting to get married and have her own children. She came to me for advice when she was 26.
"Mom, do you remember Nicola from my university? I talked to her about getting married, and she invited me to a party. I'm not sure if I should go or not."
Seeing my daughter seemingly exhausted from thinking about marriage and kids, I decided to give her a push. "Well, isn't this a chance? You can trust an invitation from Nicola. Why not just go and see?" Sharon looked somewhat anxious, but eventually decided to go. And so the day of the party came. Sharon left the house wearing fancier clothes than usual. Her makeup, different from her normal style, seemed to be done with extra effort. Dylan and I had dinner alone for the first time in a while. As we ate, Dylan seemed restless. "What's wrong? Wasn't the dinner good?" I asked half-jokingly, and Dylan replied awkwardly,
"Of course not. I'm just a bit worried about Sharon. I hope she doesn't get deceived by some strange guy."
I felt the same way. After all, I was the one who had encouraged Sharon to go.
"I guess so. But it's Sharon, she'll be fine. She has a good eye for men. After all, she takes after me in that regard. I guess you're right."
I think we both were trying to mask our anxiety with laughter. Then, a few hours later, Sharon returned. When I asked how it went, Sharon said with a smile,
"There was a great guy there. A really great guy."
And she kept repeating how he was a good person. Whether it was from the cold air of January or the excitement of finding someone, her cheeks were flushed. "What kind of person is he?" Dylan asked, and to that Sharon proudly replied,
"He's part of a TV crew. His name is Christopher. He goes on location shoots and visits all sorts of places. I went on many trips with you too, right? So, we hit it off."
Upon hearing this, Dylan frowned slightly. "A TV crew, so he's in the entertainment industry, right? I don't have a very good impression of that. How should I put it? Didn't he look a bit frivolous?"
But you're the one who said, men who travel to different places and see various sceneries are trustworthy. He had black hair and didn't look frivolous at all. Well, I did say that, but... I calmed down Dylan, who didn't seem convinced, and told Sharon. Anyway, make sure you date him properly and take your time to find out what kind of person he is. It's late now. You have work tomorrow, right? I urged Sharon, who seemed quite drunk, to go to bed. After that, Sharon and Christopher officially started dating. Their relationship seemed to be going well, and Sharon introduced Christopher to me and Dylan. Christopher, being in the entertainment industry, initially seemed elusive. But after talking to him, he turned out to be very personable. So when they brought up marriage, I genuinely agreed. The best thing is to respect Sharon's choice. Thus, they continued their relationship smoothly and got married 2 years after meeting. Christopher, wearing an undoubtedly expensive suit, came to greet us formally. He held a bottle of high-end wine in his hand. I was genuinely happy for Sharon's marriage. Sharon's face, brimming with happiness, made it clear she was at the peak of her joy. Thinking back, that might have been the happiest time. Christopher, looking confident, addressed Dylan. I've brought some wine. Let me pour you a glass. Dylan, albeit awkwardly, accepted it. The meal continued in a good atmosphere for a while. It was when the bottom of the wine bottle Christopher brought started to show that the mood changed. You're in the entertainment industry, right? Frankly, I still can't trust you. Dylan's words made me freeze. The room suddenly became quiet, the atmosphere tense. I didn't want to ruin this happy moment. Hey, why are you saying such unpleasant things all of a sudden? I sharply said to Dylan. Sharon then spoke up. That's right. What are you talking about, Dad? That's just prejudice. It's terrible that you can't trust the person I chose. Dylan's frown did not ease even at Sharon's words. Christopher tried to maintain a smile, but he was undoubtedly upset. The evening ended with an awkward atmosphere. After Christopher left, a sober Dylan sincerely apologized to us. Indeed, Dylan's opinion was nothing but a prejudice. Sharon's smile had proved Christopher was a good match, which was evident. Gradually, seeing our daughter's happy smile, Dylan began to accept Christopher. They were supposed to have pledged eternal love at their wedding. They were supposed to be in love. Now, I regret not listening more to Dylan's concerns. As Sharon was approaching her 30s, she announced her pregnancy. Both Dylan and I were overjoyed. Dylan, like when he talks about tourist destinations, awaited the grandchild's birth with a childlike smile. And I too, got too excited for my age. You two are getting ahead of yourselves. Then, at Sharon's request, she and Christopher decided to move in with us. We thought it would be better for everyone to live here together. We were saying you guys would surely be happy living with your grandchild. That's true. You both have jobs, right? Leave the caregiving to Grandma and Grandpa. Don't worry. Their belongings had already been moved from the nearby apartment where they had been living. Everything was prepared for the whole family to live together. Tears welled up as I thought about my daughter's growth and the upcoming birth of my grandchild. As we had these conversations, Sharon's belly grew. Christopher was still busy with work. I understood his job, but I wondered if he couldn't be a bit more supportive of Sharon. As for Sharon, being on maternity leave, she spent most of her time at home. I asked about Christopher's work. Sharon, rubbing her belly, defended him. Christopher is busy. He's always on the go. But he calls every day to say good morning and good night. We're even thinking of names for the baby together. Hoping for a beautiful girl. Oh, we'd love to help pick a name too. Sharon smiled, savoring her happiness, as she listed a few name options. As the due date approached, Sharon decided to name the baby Tiana. The moment Tiana was born, her vibrant cry was indescribably precious. Sharon's relieved expression. Tears in Christopher's eyes. Dylan's beaming smile. And Tiana, trying her best to breathe.
I was confident that our lives were solid and would continue to be so. However, the happy future I envisioned never came to be. At the height of my daughter's happiness, I was shocked to learn a disturbing truth from Dylan. He had confirmed some unbelievable behavior from Christopher. I didn't want to doubt him. He was supposed to be the perfect husband for my precious daughter. Despite my uneasy feelings, Dylan, with a serious expression, insisted.
I saw it with my own eyes. I know it's hard to believe Christopher's suspicious behavior. Violet, you might not want to know, but it's true. That man is lying. To us and to Sharon.
I had never seen Dylan so emotional in over 30 years together. From his unsettled state, I learned everything. Dylan's seriousness made me realize the gravity of the situation. But it was too much to accept all at once. Why would Christopher do such a thing? What about Sharon and Tiana? My heart pounded, wishing I hadn't heard this truth. I wanted it all to be a lie. Especially since Tiana had just been born. Since Dylan told me, a swelling rage grew inside me. I felt the greatest anger of my life. I didn't know what the right answer was, but it was for Sharon and for Tiana. Reluctantly, I decided to follow Dylan's plan. Then we quietly began our preparations, just the two of us. Meanwhile, Tiana continued to grow. A month after her birth, we decided to go out as a family. The attendees were me, Dylan, Sharon, Christopher, and Tiana, 5 in total. I heard Christopher had planned this outing, which was a great surprise. He had arranged everything, including the meal. Dylan and I carefully prepared for the day. Upon arrival, Sharon lovingly watched Tiana. After taking a family photo with Tiana at the center, I wished for these peaceful days to continue. I glanced at Christopher. He wasn't looking at Sharon or Tiana. Although smiling, Christopher's attitude and tone seemed detached, as if preoccupied with something else. Then Christopher suddenly said with a sly smile,
I want to take this opportunity and discuss this with you. I had a DNA test taken because I thought she didn't look like me. And it turns out she's not my daughter.
Christopher said, so pointing at my granddaughter Tiana, who was being held by Sharon. I made an eye contact with my husband Dylan while Christopher was unable to hide his smirk. Just as I thought. I was disappointed, but quickly anger overwhelmed me.
The test results show that Tiana is not my child.
His shout drew the attention of those around us.
So you've been cheating on me behind my back? You bastard. Were you having an affair with one of the fathers who picks up their kids from daycare?
I felt a deep sense of regret. I still wanted to believe in him.
A woman like this can't be trusted at all. Divorce. I want a divorce.
Sharon seemed unable to comprehend Christopher's sudden change. She just froze and couldn't move. Sensing something amiss, Tiana, held by Sharon, started crying. Tiana's cries echoed throughout the area. After a moment, Sharon, with a look of astonishment, confronted Christopher.
What do you mean? Why would you say that all of a sudden I haven't cheated?
Christopher answered with a smug look.
You say you haven't cheated, but can you provide any concrete evidence right now?
I can't provide that, but I really haven't.
Ah, so you're making excuses. I have irrefutable evidence here.
Saying this, Christopher showed us the DNA test results and a divorce application. The test results indicated that there was no proof of a parent-child relationship between Christopher and Tiana. Half of the divorce application was already filled out. He had prepared all this. Sharon, faced with this evidence, couldn't say anything, her face on the verge of tears. Her lips were tightly pressed, enduring the pain, and my heart ached for her. Who could have imagined she would be treated this way?
The results show that she's not my child. A cheating woman made a child with some other man, and the DNA proves it. Sign the divorce papers quickly. If you resist, I'll take you to court and demand compensation.
Then Christopher, who had retracted his smile, spoke in a low voice.
Hey, I've got a good lawyer. You can't escape, so be prepared.
It's incredible how far he could take this act. This was the man he turned out to be. I felt a rage towards him like never before for neglecting my daughter. Glancing at Dylan, I saw he was angry too. Now was the only chance. I exchanged glances with Dylan and then took out a photo we had prepared in advance. This photo was our trump card. Holding it with trembling, angry hands, I presented it in front of Christopher.
If you're going to do that, we have something to present as well. Right, Dylan? Yes, indeed.
Dylan pulled several photos from his jacket pocket. They were photos of Christopher's infidelity, obtained by hiring a private investigator. Each photo was decisive evidence, but we had prepared multiple.
It's necessary to confront him thoroughly with irrefutable evidence. How come these are here? What's this?
In each of the several photos, Christopher was clearly visible. There were pictures of him walking arm in arm with an unknown woman, entering a hotel with a woman, and kissing a woman on the street, among others. Since the day Dylan confirmed Christopher's suspicious behavior, we had been investigating his actions with a detective. The skill of a professional detective is astounding.
So, you were regularly meeting another woman, planning to switch from Sharon to her? Who's the one cheating, I wonder?
Dylan also started yelling as well.
You bastard! Trampling on Sharon's feelings.
Christopher's smile had vanished, replaced by an unmistakable panic.
How did you find out? No, wait. This is fake. You made these composite photos to slander me, you liar. Sharon's the one cheating.
His voice was low at first, as if reassuring himself, then became accusatory, threatening us. But my anger was beyond control. Dylan, as if echoing my fury, shouted.
You're the one who is lying. Are you saying all these photos are fake?
Perhaps feeling overwhelmed by Dylan, or realizing his excuses were futile, Christopher suddenly became quiet. Dylan, although sometimes seen as unapproachable, hardly ever raises his voice. I realized for the first time how intimidating he could be when he was truly angry. Dylan took a breath and began talking in a quiet manner.
My discomfort wasn't mistaken. You might not have noticed, but I heard everything from the bathroom. Those overly suspicious conversations. Things like I'll manage the separation smoothly or help me forge the DNA report. I didn't intend to listen, but such conversations are obviously strange. You've been deceiving and hurting our daughters all this time.
Dylan had accidentally overheard Christopher's phone conversation while he was in the bathroom. Dylan had been close to the door without realizing Christopher was there. And then Dylan raised his voice again.
We're going to do another DNA test. Science will prove it. The second test should yield the same results, right? You'll take responsibility for what you've said. Don't even think about running away.
Christopher's legs wobbled, his nose running, reduced to a pitiable state. Tiana, tired from crying, had fallen asleep. Was he always such a pathetic man? I remembered his sharp, robust appearance when he first came to ask for our daughter's hand in marriage. That man was nowhere to be seen now. At that moment, something snapped inside me. Sharon must have felt the same. Her eyes brimming with tears, she looked at Christopher with a mix of disgust and pity. I rubbed Sharon's back. I wanted to believe in you, if only I could. I sighed heavily, but now that the truth was revealed, Christopher could only apologize. His pride gone, his apologies seemed too late. Then, as Christopher was profusely apologizing, Sharon approached him. With tears in her eyes, she lashed out at him angrily.
Don't joke around. It's too late to apologize now. Get out of our sight. You're the worst.
Christopher's apology was cut off by the sound of a sharp slap. It felt like a satisfying sound that dispelled the terrible atmosphere. After receiving a powerful slap from Sharon, Christopher collapsed to his knees. He tried to flee but seemed unable to move, his legs giving out.
As you wish, we'll part ways. Goodbye forever.
Christopher received the stares of everyone around. Urged by Sharon, Dylan and I left the scene. Sharon didn't look back, not even once. According to the detective's investigation, Christopher's affair partner was an ex-girlfriend. The reason they broke up was apparently because he was a part-timer with low income at the time. Back then, Christopher was juggling part-time night shifts at a grocery store and stocking shelves at a supermarket. Later, Christopher joined a TV crew, and during a street interview for a TV program, he happened to meet his ex-girlfriend again. It was a wide show hosted by a celebrity known for his sharp tongue. His ex-girlfriend seemed impressed with Christopher, who had made a place for himself in the entertainment business. By this time, Sharon was already pregnant. Both wanting to rekindle their relationship, the ex-girlfriend was quite cooperative with this plan. Such a hopeless situation, I thought. Now that I knew the whole truth, my anger was replaced more with disappointment. On the way home, none of us spoke a word. If even we, as parents, were deeply hurt, Sharon's emotional wounds must be immeasurable. In the heavy silence, Dylan broke the ice.
Hey, you should just rest for now. I'll take care of all the tedious things like the compensation claim and other procedures with Violet.
Sharon just nodded silently. I also spoke to Sharon.
Your life is still ahead of you. For Tiana's sake, eat delicious food, get plenty of sleep, enjoy beautiful scenery, and just focus on resting. We'll always be here to support you.
Sharon was still struggling to come to terms with her feelings. But with Tiana there, we had to move forward. Few months passed by, but Sharon tended to stay at home. Given what had happened, it was understandable. Yet gradually, she regained her smile and declared,
If I keep mourning, Tiana's going to get mad at me. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry for worrying you so much. I'm thinking of returning to work soon.
As for the compensation, Christopher and his party ended up paying $15,000 each. It was a deserved retribution. And Christopher was dramatically dumped by his ex-girlfriend. She was furious about the large sum of money lost because of him.
That's a fitting end for such a man,
Dylan said with a face that couldn't hide his disgust. About half a year later, in a season of blue skies, Sharon successfully returned to work. Worried, I secretly visited her workplace. My concerns were unnecessary, as I saw Sharon lively and happily working surrounded by children. I told this to Dylan, and to that he proudly snorted.
I told you there was no need to worry.
Though he had hesitated to come with me till the last minute. Hearing Dylan's words, I couldn't help but laugh, feeling our happy daily life returning. Despite everything, our family had regained peaceful days. Tiana was growing up healthy. Dylan, now past 60, was still actively working. Today, I'm preparing a meal for a family dinner. After setting the table, I said to everyone,
Let's go on a family trip again. Anywhere, as long as we're together. Absolutely. Anywhere we go will be fun.
At that moment, Tiana made a sound as if replying. Her incomprehensible babble was enough to bring a smile to Sharon's face. We all smiled in response. Dad and Mom, live long, okay? I want to show Tiana the wide world. Just like the old times, I hope we can travel together again. Of course, I plan to live long. Right, Dylan? Yes, indeed. Maybe it's time to cut back on the alcohol. Dylan went to put the beer he had prepared back in the fridge. I too thought about starting walking myself to stay healthy. With these 4 people, I felt like we could do anything. I want to continue spending my days in this house, unchanged. Because I know there is certain happiness here.